big news of the day. The takeover battle for Fortis Healthcare gets to the next stage as the board backs Munjal and Burman with the winning take. And as you can see visuals on your screen out there, we have the management of Fortis just coming up, getting ready to speak to us with respect to the latest development with respect to the Munjal and the Burman family. That said, before they can begin, we also have Darshan Mehta joining us. Darshan, anything that you'd want to add, any updates here?
Yeah, so basically, as of now, we don't know whether this is the final bid or no, because they will need to tell us what happens if they get a counter bid or something. So that's what I want to understand. Mainly, I want to understand what their rationale is, because they've said that we've accepted this bid, but they haven't given any rationale of why this bid and why not the others. And what
just to introduce myself, I'm Brian Tempest. I'm an independent director on the board of Fortis Healthcare. I chair the audit committee, and since early this year, I have also chaired the board meetings. We had as you know, we've been going through a process, and I'd just like to give you the feedback about that. We believe that we've had a very, very healthy process in order to determine who should be the right bid to accept, and it's involved a lot of inputs from quite a number of different parties. And in fact, we started the board meeting yesterday morning at 7 o'clock, and we finished it at 10 o'clock at night. So we actually had quite a mammoth board meeting, and when we concluded, we had, as you know, a majority decision, and we were pleased to announce that actually the Burman and Honda family have Hero family have actually been awarded the bid, and this is what is now being recommended to shareholders. So that is the situation, and I imagine you've got one or two questions, so I'm quite happy to take those.
Can you explain to us, I just read that now, can you explain to us that after this marathon board meeting, why is it that you have chosen the party that you have chosen over the other four suitors, even though this party may not have that much experience in healthcare, does not run hospitals, maybe barring one in Indiana, and they may not have been the highest offer as well on the table?
Well, we looked at all the different binding bids from the point of view of certainty versus risk, and we looked at them from the point of view also of liquidity for the company. And as you know, we took the advice of an expert advisory committee that had got two eminent gentlemen that were on it, who were able to give us some good advice. We also took the advice from two financial organizations, and also we took advice from a legal organization as well. And when we took all those elements together and we evaluated the four binding bids that we reviewed, the one that had the majority support was the Dabur and Hero group. And you mentioned that they don't have any healthcare experience. In fact, I think they've got over 30 or 40 investments in healthcare.
But not hospitals, barring one hospital in
Correct. Correct.
One thing having pharma products,
Correct.
another running hospitals.
Correct. They have one hospital, and actually it is also one that actually has a nurse training college, and it also has is a training hospital. And one of the issues actually when you run a hospital is making sure that you have a good supply of well-trained nurses and doctors. So there is a synergy there as well. But you're quite right, they don't have as many hospitals as perhaps some of the other parties that we've been dealing with. But from the point of view of certainty and risk and looking at the liquidity flowing into the company, we felt that was the best decision.
Why is that? Look at Manipal, it has experience, it has all the qualities you mentioned, and it was putting double the money of the equity infusion into Fortis. So can you explain to us what won a Munjal-Burman bid over the Manipal TPP?
Well, I don't intend to go through each individual bid and give the benefits of each one and versus some of the other ones. In fact, it proves it doesn't. We don't really need to get into those individual details. But in terms of the 4 that we looked at, certainly the Manipal deal was not one of the favourites across the whole of the selections. But we looked at them, as I've said, through these different yardsticks. We also had to make sure that there was that the private equity players in SRL were taken care of, and we also had to make sure that there was the RHT acquisition, which we committed to. But all those elements we were satisfied with, and also we feel that, and I keep coming back to it, certainty and liquidity were important elements. Remember, this process started 2 years ago. There were some of the parties that came in front of us had actually looked at over 300 different modifications. And it is important for the shareholders, for the company, for the doctors, the staff, and for the patients in this hospital and every hospital of Fortis, that a decision is made for the good of everybody. And we have deferred and gone through this extended process to make it as transparent and independent as possible, and that's where we got to at the end of 15 hours last night. Sorry. One question at a time. Sorry.
Which offer did the external advisory panel recommend, and how many board members were in favor of the Munjal-Burman offer? Who were they? And the new members were opposed to Munjal-Burman.
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't intend to go through the individual advisors and what their advice to. Not the external advisory command. I don't intend to go through each individual one, but all I can say is it was very useful what they gave to us, and they were very, very eminent people involved. So that it was an important part of the decision, but it was just a part. He asked for a second question, which he was asking about how was the board, how was the place of different people on the board and that sort of thing. Well, as you know, on the board we have 3 members that have actually got a lot of experience with Fortis and so on, and we have about 5 that actually have been appointed in the last couple of months. Of those 5. 2 voted for the Hero Mundal option, and 3 voted for another option. And so you had the mixture of the 3 that were, if you like, well-knowledged and understanding of hospitals and the history, and you had some of the new people that led to the majority, and then some of the other new people were looking at another option, but after 15 hours we had to make a decision. So that's the way we left it.
So what happens to the SRL board now?
I'm sorry.
What happens to the SRL board now, because the Singh Brothers are still there, and will that board also be restructured? What happens to Singh Brothers?
Well, first of all, with respect to the Singh Brothers, we've requested the resignation of the Singh Brothers from the SRL board. I think I last wrote about 3 or 4 days ago requesting the documentation. In terms of what does happen in terms of the SRL board after now this process has been decided in terms of the Dabo Hero group, I know that they would like to sit down with the SRL management and understand that business more. So I think you have to talk to that party now in terms of the future of SRL, but certainly they have a couple of different scenarios, but they wish to talk more with the SRL management.
When you say certainty, what do you mean? What do you mean when you say certainty?
Certainty, I mean that actually there is going to be a certainty that the funds will flow into the company and not be held back by some issue that could be generated in the process. So it's important that there was a clear process that would lead to fluidity and liquidity for the company.
Brian, this is Chetan from Business Television India.
Yeah.
So when do you expect the deal to be cleared, and do you think the shareholders' nod is going to come easy? And post this infusion, do you think you would be needing another round of infusion as well? Well,
first of all, I think that the shareholders meeting will probably be in about 30 days. And I would imagine, because of the real status of these 2 families, that there will be a lot of support from shareholders across the company. I've in fact received already emails from shareholders congratulating me on the actual result. So I think that that there will be support for this in 30 days, and I think that that will be a very positive, as I've said, for Fortis and the shareholders of Fortis and the staff of Fortis and the patients of Fortis. There was a second part of your question. I can't.
Another round of infusion.
Well, I think you've got to sit down with the Burman and the family and talk to them about actually where they wish to go in terms of the next infusion. But I mean, you've got to talk with them in terms of their aspirations. But you can see already that there is a significant amount of money that's going to flow into Fortis. It's going to flow in very quickly, and there is certainty that this company will be back on its feet and will be in a strong position very quickly, and that I think is very important. You've heard me say this in the past. I would like the management to be focused on improving the performance and the results of the hospital business, and not be spending their time working on dealing with banks and loans and that sort of thing. They're much better working on the efficiency of the hospitals, and that is what the board is very keen on doing. We've looked at these different scenarios long enough, and we made a decision.
Mr. Tempest, so with regards to SRL, one of the clauses in the Munjal-Burman bid was that they wanted to sell SRL, possibly to fund the RST acquisition. Will that be happening now? Well, especially considering that they'll be having just 17% stake after the acquisition.
You're quite right in your observation, but I do know that they wish to sit down with the SRL management and decide which is the best way forward. So they have shared with us that that was part of that, but they do wish to sit down with the SRL management and understand it better.
Mr. Tempest, there's an EGM on the 22nd of May.
You're quite right.
And, shareholders in the past have essentially campaigned to get rid of at least 4 directors who voted for this deal.
You're right.
Now, do you actually see shareholder angst trying to force a hostile bid further on, or do you see that settled now?
Well, let me ask that question. Let me answer the question. You're quite right. There is 2 shareholders which have over 10%, and they have requested an extraordinary general meeting, and it's scheduled for the 22nd of May, and they have put up for vote 4 existing members of the board. I think I should also draw to your attention that one of those members of the board last Friday also faced the shareholder vote and was re-elected by the shareholders of the company. If you just check, you'll find last Friday there was one of these directors was re-elected. So we believe that the overall shareholding body will actually re-elect the existing members of the board on the 22nd of May. But the 2 shareholders are important shareholders. They have a significant shareholding in the company. They're within their legal rights to request this, and we're going ahead with it, and it will take place on the 22nd.
Second part of my question, how confident are you that there won't be any hostile bids further on?
Well, who can tell what is going to happen in the future? You know that the world is full of opportunities and threats, and you never know what is going to happen on that front.
Dr. Brian, one second. So, a lot of money from the Munjal offer comes through preferential route, which will take some time before Fortis gets hands on it. And while other offers were having direct infusion, so what scores? So, what is the current cash need of Fortis on day 1? And will you, given the time frame of money inflowing at the through the preferential route, do you think that the current cash situation you will be able to sustain through the current cash?
Well, you see, I think part of the cash situation has been an overhang from the story around the promoters in terms of what is happening, or the ex-promoters in terms of what is happening with them, and therefore some of these bank lines have actually sort of dried up. I truly believe with the 2 names that are now associated with Fortis, this situation will be changing as we sit here actually in this room, and I think that there will be a change in the way that the banks will be dealing with Fortis very quickly. So I am relatively confident that actually those issues will now be behind us. But you're quite right, there is a certain time delay, but I think there will be a response from some of the banks and there will be support coming from them.
Hi Brian, it's me again, Nandara.
Yeah.
I have to ask you this question. There have been allegations of perhaps not the best of corporate governance standards at Fortis. We've all seen those media reports, whether it's with alleged siphoning of funds or quarterly results not being signed on by Big Five, not Big Four. But moving on from that, you've also seen a change in board that has taken place. Board members whose removal was being sought had set up the advisory committee. One member, stalwart like Renuka Ramnath, then stepped down from it. Talk to your shareholders, talk to the analyst community. How can you say the best of corporate governance standards have been followed by Fortis, even when it comes to deciding the winner, when you yourself had conceded it was not unanimous and that there was a division?
I'll tell you why, because I'm chairman of the audit committee, and this allegation that came, I think, on Bloomberg, it came on, I think, the 7th of February. Just to give you a flavour, I happened to be in India on that day, because I do live in Europe, and the 8th, I called a meeting of the management and asked them to give me an assessment and investigation of that. By the 13th, which was the end of the week, they'd done an internal investigation and they came to me and said there was no illegal activities against this Bloomberg allegation. And but that wasn't sufficient for me in the audit committee or the audit committee itself, and I specifically requested that Luther and Luther, some lawyers, get brought in to check this internal review and to make sure that actually it is challenged and thorough, and they're now doing total forensics to give us an answer. And that is going on at the moment. We won't know for a few...
You sold the company before the forensic audit?
Everybody knows that. And so the forensic audit is coming in, and we're expecting to get a result, hopefully in May, which will declare, what was the situation within the company. But so far, I am not aware of any illegal activities. I think there may be some procedural things that we need to put right, but there are always procedures that you need to work upon. We have a very thorough audit committee. You should see the internal audit reports that are about that thick, which we go through every quarter. But in terms of this particular issue, you need to remember that it was the audit committee that briefed the lawyers, and now everybody who's investigating Fortis is very keen just to sit back and wait for the Luther report, and then we will see what it says.
And the second part of my question.
What was that?
How is it that people whose removal is being sought are deciding the procedures and have decided a winner when you yourself conceded it's not a unanimous decision?
Well, as I mentioned to you, of the 4 that are actually being challenged at the next meeting, 1 was re-elected last Friday. That gives you a flavour of the sentiment of the church.
The board yesterday as well?
No, yesterday that was just there was 2 people who we were actually just formalising. They've been on the board since a month or so, 2 months maybe. So that was just a formalisation that came through the board meeting. Yeah.
Dr. Tempest, this is Rajiv. I have 2 questions. One is about whether any part of this transaction entails any funds going into the Singh family's holdings, and second is, I may have missed the first part of the meeting. I got stuck in traffic.
Okay.
What was the ratio in terms of majority at the board?
Okay. Well, all the money goes into the Fortis company, and you've seen that. It's very clear in that. In terms of what I mentioned earlier on, I've already answered the question, but I will just clarify it. In terms of the board, we have 8 people on the board. There are 3 members of the board that actually have been with Fortis for a fairly long time and understand the hospital business and understand the way that it works. And we have 5 members that actually have joined the board in the last couple of months. And of those, so in terms of the voting, the 3 who know the business the best and the longest actually voted for the Hero double option. And of the 5 new ones, 2 voted in favour of that, and 3 voted in favour of another party. So after we started the board meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning and we finished at 10 o'clock at night, after that sort of 15 hours and all the inputs we got from a whole variety of advisors, we took a decision on a majority basis. Because it was in the interests of the company, the shareholders, the staff, and the patients that we move on. We've been on this process for too long, and that is why we want the management to start focusing on improving the performance of the business.
What was the choice of the other three?
Sorry?
What was the choice of the other three members?
It was another party. I'm not going to get into the individual choice of different people. I don't think that's fair.
Excuse me, hi.
Yeah, hi.
I just wanted to clarify the Luthra investigation.
Yeah?
Did you say that the report is expected later in May?
Yeah.
Okay, when exactly is there?
Well, I wish I knew myself, actually, but we are in the hands of the lawyers.
Right now, Grant Thornton is doing an audit.
Grant Thornton is doing the forensics. You're quite right.
So what stage is it at?
Well, it's part way through. It's at an advanced stage, and we're expecting a report before the end of May.